This is the Razer Pro Click V2. It's a high-end, productivity-focused, ergonomically designed mouse that still maintains the gaming DNA that you would expect from a brand like Razer. On paper, it's an excellent mouse. But at $100, is it the best possible mix of work and play, or will flaws like Razer's software get in the way? Let's jump into the details to find out. Starting with build and design, this mouse features a curved ergonomic design that I find quite comfortable. It's not a full-on ergonomic design to compete with vertical mice, though Razer did come out with a vertical version as well, which I'll be reviewing soon. Instead, this mouse is competing with the likes of the Logitech MX Master and the Keychron M6. Compared to those mice, the shape here is slightly different. It's not quite as tall. It has a very soft front-to-back curve without the steep ridge you find on those competing models. Side to side, there's also less angle to the tilt, making it feel a little bit more like a traditional flat mouse and making it more approachable if you're new to mice that are shaped like this. On the left side, there's an extended thumb rest, and on the right side, I have enough space for my fingers without requiring them to drag on the table. Overall, this mouse feels both wide and long. For my medium-sized hands, it supports a nice relaxed grip while still being friendly to a fingertip grip as well. If you've got smaller hands, this could feel a little bit unwieldy though. But on the flip side, if you've got large hands, I think that this could be a really solid option since you'd have a lot of flexibility for how you grip it, and I'd expect that it would be comfortable for most large-handed people. Here are the complete dimensions in case you want to compare it to an existing mouse. Finally, in terms of weight, mine weighed in at 107 grams, which for me feels solid without being too heavy. For comparison, that's about 20% lighter than the MX Master 3S and about 20% heavier than the Keychron M6 8K. The materials feel premium. I'm a big fan of the plastic on top in particular. It's got a nice, smooth, and soft feel to it without seeming to have any sort of coating that's going to wear away with time. The sides have a grippy rubber material that feels rugged, but might be a little bit more likely to show wear and tear with a lot of use. Next, let's move to buttons and wheels. Now, maybe it's just me, but I'm getting a little sick of brands describing mice like this as having 9 programmable buttons. Do you see 9 buttons on this thing? Because I certainly don't. There's left and right clicks, forward and back buttons on the side, and a scroll wheel. That's really it. 5. But they include scrolling up, scrolling down, tilting left, tilting right, and pressing the wheel all as separate buttons. By that logic, this 84-key keyboard actually has 336 programmable buttons because there's 4 layers available for customization on VIA. But we would never say that because it doesn't make any sense. Now, sorry to Razer for catching some strays here because this is something that's being done across the industry, but it's just really silly marketing that's beginning to bother me. Going back to the facts, the main left and right clicks use a high-end mechanical switch which is rated for 60 million clicks, meaning that this thing should last for a very long time. The clicks make traditional sounds, not like the silent switches found on many competing productivity mice. The clicks are also very easy to press. Now, this could be seen as a benefit for some, but I've run into an issue where I unintentionally press the right click when my hand is just resting on the mouse, just because my finger is resting a little bit too firmly on the switch. It feels like something I can certainly adapt to over time, but it could be frustrating for some people. The main scroll wheel has a nice texture on it that makes it very easy to spin. By default, it has nice big tactile bumps as you scroll, but using the button on top switches it to a free spinning mode. The combination of those 2 modes is referred to as Razer's hyper scroll technology. Now, typically, I just use a regular tactile mode on all scroll wheels for mice. I've never really found a free spinning mode that I like, other than Logitech's MagSpeed wheels, which can switch between tactile and free spinning automatically. On this Razer mouse though, I actually like the free spinning mode. It has a bit more resistance than others I've tried, which allows you to give it some small flicks to go down a page, and the scrolling will actually stop rather than just continuing on and on. It's almost more like a super smooth scrolling feature that behaves similarly to the tactile mode and a little bit less like a normal free spinning mode. I like it, but since it's a little bit different than other mice, if you're used to a normal free spinning mode, you might not like it as much. The scroll wheel also features a side-to-side tilt, which is a great addition for productivity users. It works quite well, allowing you to move in different increments depending on how long you hold it down for. My only complaint is that if you need to move in a very small increment, it can be a little bit challenging to do so, as it has a slight bias towards larger movements. For sound, the wheel in tactile mode is loud, but not aggressively so. And the free spinning mode is pretty much completely silent. Clicking the wheel is also very quiet, and using the side-to-side tilt functionality is just a little bit louder. Moving to the side of the mouse, you have traditional forward and back buttons, which are well placed and sound just slightly quieter than the main clicks. The only thing missing here would be a horizontal scroll wheel, which many other productivity mice have. But in this case, they opted for that tilt functionality instead, which is fine. For the sensor, this mouse uses Razer's Focus Pro optical sensor, which is probably a little bit overkill for most productivity uses, but gives you the flexibility to use this both as a productivity mouse during the day and a gaming mouse in the evening. In terms of specs, the sensor can go up to 30,000 dpi, meaning it can get very precise. It can track on just about any surface, including glass, and it can handle very, very fast movements with a maximum speed of 550 inches per second and a maximum acceleration of 40 Gs. So in layman's terms, you can make really fast movements and it should still be able to track accurately. The remaining topics we have to talk about for this mouse are connectivity, the RGB lighting, the battery, and the software. All of which are a little bit intertwined with one another, but I'll do my best to make it all very clear. Now, starting with connectivity, you can use this mouse with Mac or Windows, and you can connect it using 3 Bluetooth connections, a direct wired connection, and an included 2.4 gig USB receiver, but I'm not a fan of how they decided to implement it all. On the bottom of the mouse, there is a single toggle between wired and wireless modes. Wired is very straightforward. Just set it, plug in, and you're good to go. If you want wireless though, you have to use the RGB lighting around the bottom as your cue, which is definitely not my favorite method for switching connections. A white light around the mouse corresponds to the USB receiver, blue is Bluetooth connection number 1, green is Bluetooth connection number 2, and yellow is Bluetooth connection number 3. Now obviously, this isn't the most difficult thing to remember, but it would have been way easier if they took the approach that seemingly every other mouse uses, and instead just put a few small LEDs on the bottom next to the button corresponding to each of those connections. I'm curious if you feel differently, but for me, it's much easier for me to remember which computer is device number 1 and which one is device number 2, rather than which one is green and which one is yellow. Plus, with this current setup, I can't see which connection is actually currently enabled just by looking at it. I have to actually press that button, which in turn changes it to the next connection, so then I have to go all the way back around to where I was before. Now, if you find yourself in a troubleshooting scenario where connectivity is not working, this will be particularly frustrating. The final connection option is the 2.4 gig USB receiver, which has a nice magnetic storage slot in the bottom of the mouse when you're not using it. The receiver uses Razer's hyperspeed technology, which aims at creating a stable connection with low latency and limited lag. However, this is not the latest and greatest version of Razer's hyperspeed, which can offer up to 8,000 Hz polling rates on some of their other mice. This particular model is limited to 1000 Hz polling on both the USB receiver and the wired connection. This rate refers to how often your mouse is going to send information to your device. Higher polling rates are important for gamers who are looking for every single edge they can get in a competitive environment, and also for folks who are using ultra high refresh rate monitors and just want to have the smoothest experience possible. For most people out there, 1000 Hz on this mouse offers plenty. But if you want to compare this to the most high-end gaming mice on the market, it's not going to match those very top specs that exist today. Now, adding to these downsides is the fact that out of the box, this mouse uses 1600 DPI and also a maximum of 500 Hertz polling. The only way to adjust those is by installing the Razer Synapse software. Now, this is extremely frustrating, and we're going to talk a lot more about it in a moment. First, though, we need to talk about the RGB underglow on this mouse. The RGB lighting is legitimately cool. It looks really nice, way nicer than I expected. I'm not a big RGB guy personally. The lights can get pretty darn bright with 14 different light zones underneath the diffuser. There are 7 different light modes, including one that reacts to your computer's audio, plus you can sync it up with other compatible Razer devices if you happen to have more than one. Now, that's all well and good, but just like with connectivity, I've got an issue here. When you take this mouse out of the box, the lighting will be on by default. It's set to 33% brightness and has a feature called Smart Dimming enabled, which turns the light off when you're actively using the mouse, and then re-enables it after the mouse sits idle for about 3 seconds. Just like before, if you don't like this default setting, you must install the Razer Synapse software to do anything about it. Once again, very frustrating. Assuming that you are able and willing to install the software, you do get the opportunity to change the brightness, including turning the lighting off entirely. You can change the light effect and apply that change across all your compatible devices, and you can enable a couple of features to turn lights off at different times. This includes that smart dimming feature that's on by default, which can be disabled or set to just dim rather than to fully turn the light off. Finally, you can have the mouse automatically turn off the lighting when your computer display is off or when your computer is idle for a certain amount of time. All of these settings are important as we think about our next topic, which is battery. This mouse includes a rechargeable battery along with a good, not great 1.2 meter USB-A to USB-C charging cable. The advertised battery life is 3.5 months, which is pretty outstanding. You can also fast charge to get 2 working days of use with just 5 minutes of charge. Not sure exactly what 2 working days is, but that's pretty impressive no matter what. However, the details of the battery tests that yielded those results are not made clear, and therefore my assumption is that these battery life numbers are specific to the lowest 125 Hz polling rate and with backlighting turned off. I say that because in my testing, this mouse died regularly with the backlighting on. It was actually kind of painful how often I had to charge this mouse. And so once again, out of the box, you're not going to get anywhere close to the advertised specs. To get there, you have to, once again, download the Razer Synapse software. I know it's getting pretty redundant at this point. Now, if you do get the software, you not only have the ability to make the backlight changes we talked about to save the battery, you also have the ability to adjust your wireless power saving settings, which sets how long the mouse will remain idle before going into a deeper sleep. This is another critical setting for maximizing battery. Now, it defaults to 1 minute and can go as high as 10 minutes. When you're using the 2.4 gig USB receiver, this sleep mode is no problem at all. There's a split-second delay while the mouse wakes up, but it is not really a big deal. On Bluetooth, though, it's almost unusable. It takes between 2 and 3 seconds to wake back up, which if you're just sitting there moving your mouse back and forth trying to get your cursor to wake up, it feels like an absolute eternity. So if you plan to use Bluetooth and you can't download the software, you're going to waste 2 seconds jiggling your mouse every 1 minute of idle time. And that is just not acceptable in my book. Productivity mouse? More like lost productivity mouse. So now let's round up all of the different limitations that you're subjected to if you don't or can't install the software. Because remember, any mouse that's targeted at productivity will be used on corporate work computers, which often have very strict limitations on installing any sort of third-party programs. If you don't have the software, that excellent 30,000 DPI sensor is limited to just 1600 DPI. The 1000 Hz polling rate capability is capped out at 500 Hz. The RGB lighting will be off when you're using your mouse, but will turn on when it's idle, which will drain your battery. And finally, if you use Bluetooth, every 1 minute you leave your mouse idle will require multiple seconds of sitting there waiting for it to wake back up. That is a pretty painful set of limitations. On the bright side, there is onboard memory for a single profile. Now that means that you can install Razer software on a personal computer, for example, configure the mouse over there, and then use it with those changes on your work computer that doesn't have the software installed. However, even this has some annoying nuances. Now, in my testing, changes like this will work. But if you go back to the computer with the software and you boot that software back up with the mouse connected, it may actually just reset all of your changes. Now, for a long time, I couldn't figure out why this was happening. I was able to resolve it eventually, though, by logging into a Razer account on the Synapse software. Now, this seems to indicate that the changes are saved to the cloud on my account rather than actually locally on my machine. It might be more complicated than that, but if you run into a situation where your changes keep getting wiped out, logging into an account may be the fix. But okay, limitations aside, if you will be able to install the program and you're willing to have a program like this running in the background of your computer at all times, let's talk about what Razer Synapse can actually do. First of all, though, I just have to say that this software is confusing. I got frustrated with it and confused on several occasions, and I'm someone who implemented and configured software for a living for many years. So maybe I'm just dumb and I'll find that out through the comments, totally fine. But if you're going to be using a Razer software for the first time with this mouse, just budget in a little bit of extra time for some troubleshooting. Once you get it working though, and you grant it the extreme amount of system permissions that it requests, at least on Mac, there are indeed some really interesting features. We already talked about some of the controls around lighting and the power saving modes on the Performance tab. Also on this tab is where you can set your DPI using the basic single setting or using the advanced option to set a series of different DPI levels, which you can then configure with a button or buttons to toggle through them on the Customize tab. Also on this tab, you have the ability to adjust the behaviors of each button individually. Plus, you can do several other cool things. You can set app-specific behaviors so that buttons behave differently in Google Chrome compared to in Excel, for example. You can use your mouse to trigger a ton of different things, including custom macros or specific keyboard functions. There's an ability to change the DPI sensitivity on the fly, which can use those different levels that we just saw as in the advanced section, or you can use a unique mode called sensitivity clutch, which allows you to temporarily swap the DPI to a predefined level, specifically while you're holding down a certain button on the mouse. Then it automatically swaps back when you release that button. There's definitely some advanced functionality you could do here within certain games. There's also a section here called Hypershift, which is basically a second layer of controls. First, you have to set one of the standard buttons to the Hypershift option. Then, when you hold down that button, your other buttons will use the Hypershift functionality, giving you the ability to have a lot more controls built into your mouse with just the limited number of buttons it has. If you are a true power user, this is a really cool feature, but I wish that there was a bonus button somewhere or something like that that could be used to trigger it, rather than having to take away one of the limited set of buttons that are here. Finally, there is, of course, the token AI functionality that every company is trying to squeeze into their products these days, and which is heavily advertised on the product page for this mouse. This, as expected, specifically requires the Synapse software to be running for it to work, so this one won't be able to work on that corporate machine where you can't install the software. It's activated by holding down the scroll wheel. This brings up a window where you can either use ChatGPT or Copilot to rephrase, summarize, or compose an email for you. Plus, you can create a custom prompt as well if you wish. Overall, this is really similar to the AI functionality created by Logitech and is pretty pointless in my opinion. Just open up a browser window and you can do this and way more. Plus, you don't need to have an extra program running in the background to do it. In total, the software does have some really cool features, but it has been painful to use and presents a very specific set of challenges to folks that are actually in the target market for this productivity mouse. So now let's talk pricing. The Razer Pro Click V2 comes in at $100, a premium price for a pretty premium mouse. Now, if you are a Razer fan, or if you have a particular attraction to this specific shape and design, there's nothing wrong with picking this mouse up at that price. However, for me, I tend to lean towards some of the alternative options instead. If you're looking specifically for a productivity mouse, these prices are right on par with the most obvious competitor, Logitech's MX Master. Now, as I film this video, the MX Master 4, the newest version, has been leaked but not fully announced. So I can't speak yet on those exact details, but we should know pretty soon exactly how well they compare. Just note that at least on the MX Master 3S, they used a rubber coating of materials that many people had issues with, so make sure you look out for that. If you want more of a budget option in the productivity space, the Rappu MT760 Pro is worth a look. It's only $60. It does have some flaws, but it offers a lot for the price, which makes it a pretty interesting option. For another $10 though, you can get my current pick for probably the best productivity gaming hybrid mouse, which is the Keychron M6 8K. It is a very compelling option, which includes a similarly high-end sensor and an 8,000 Hertz polling rate for $30 less than the Razer mouse. Also, you can customize it through a web app rather than having to install something on your computer, just saying. All right, now to wrap this up as we always do, let's recap the differentiators and deal breakers. This mouse has a nice ergonomic shape without being as aggressive as a full-on vertical mouse, and I really think that it'll work particularly well for people with large hands. The materials are very nice, making for a really nice feel overall. The RGB lights around the bottom are unique and look beautiful, even though they'll drain your battery for sure. The scroll wheel is solid with one of the best free spinning modes that I've ever used, and a good side-to-side tilt functionality as well. There's a solid sensor and 1000 Hertz polling rates, which are not always offered on productivity-focused mice. There is onboard memory so that you can save custom settings to the mouse. However, that leads us right into the biggest potential deal breaker, which is definitely the software. It must be downloaded onto your computer to take full advantage of the features, and the default settings will not only drain your battery quicker than the advertised life because of those RGB lights, it also won't take full advantage of the high-end sensor and the polling rates that you're actually paying for. No big deal if you can and will install the software, but if you cannot, then it is a huge problem. The main clicks are a bit too light for me, leading to some accidental clicks in my use. There's no side scroll wheel, which many people look for on high-end productivity mice. And finally, that Bluetooth sleep to wake takes way too long to wake up. In its best form, this is a really solid mouse. But if you couldn't tell already, I hate the software and would recommend that you at least consider some alternative options before pulling the trigger here. But what do you think? Am I overblowing the whole software situation? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.